Amir Ziv, how's it going?
Hey Scotty, what's up?
Nothing much. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. It means a lot for you to be here. How you doing? Where are you coming to us from right now?
I'm at my home. I'm in the Catskills, the town of Kerhonkson, New York.
How far is that from the city?
It's about 2 hours north.
Well, that's not bad. Do you ever, I mean, not nowadays, you can't because of, COVID and all that. But how often was your travel schedule going upstate into the city on let's say it was just a regular non-coronavirus time? How often would you be going upstate and back to the city?
Well, during the school year, usually in the city 3 to 4 days a week, usually in one chunk. So I come down on a Sunday night or Monday morning and come back up on a Wednesday night or Thursday morning.
Does that get taxing after a while? It must, right? Or is that just built into you that you're just okay doing that kind of stuff?
At this point, I kind of built the commute muscle, but it was certainly weird in the beginning. I didn't know if I was up to it, but I've been doing it for quite a while now.
How do you use the time on the bus? Is it just for resting, or do you try to be productive on the bus as well?
Oh man, I always try to be productive and I always fail. I sleep primarily. I try to catch up and sleep.
I've always found when I travel, I always make plans like it's like, oh, I have a 6 hour train ride or whatever. It's like, oh, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then I get on there and I just go, I think I'm just going to stare out the window the whole time.
Yeah, right on.
How long have you been living upstate?
I've been living upstate for, 17 years and full time since 2013.
And you were born in Israel, correct?
That's right.
How long did you live there before you moved to the States?
Um, I grew up back and forth between Israel and the States. So I was in Israel. I was born in Israel, and then I was there up until first grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved to the States for 2 years, and then moved back to Israel for third and fourth grade. Moved back to the States for fifth, sixth, seventh grade. Moved back to Israel until I was 19, and then when I was 19 until today, I've been here.
How often do you go back to visit?
I've been trying to go once a year. It averaged out to about once a year.
Mm. So I want to ask, because I've known you for the past 2 or 3 years. You've been an incredible teacher to me. I appreciate it so much. But I haven't heard a whole lot about your origin on the drums. So how did you become a drummer, and was that your first instrument?
Yeah, it was my first instrument. It's a funny story. I became a drummer. I got interested in the drums initially because my older brother's girlfriend at the time was a drummer, and I was 8 years old, I believe, 7 or 8, and I had the biggest crush on her, and I was like, "What can I do to like spend more time with my brother's girlfriend?"
Did he know this?
He probably knew this. I mean, he certainly knows it today. So I asked, and she was a drummer, drums. So I approached my parents and I asked them for lessons with her, and they said fine. So that was it. All started with a girl, Scotty.
You know that I've noticed that a lot, because musicians always talk about, you got to make music for the right reasons, but it seems like there's a lot of people who started on a lot of, I mean, especially rock bands. You hear them talk about, it's like, oh, what was your artistic inspiration? It was like women. It's amazing how many people how many people started their career like that. But you can't argue with it, because if it gets you on the instrument, it gets you on the instrument.
Hey, what's the right reason? It's a very personal choice, and it evolves, over time. So, but that's how it started out for me.
And what was your early education on the drums like?
Education?
Yeah.
Well, she actually gave me proper lessons, on traditional grip. So my first approach to holding the sticks was on traditional grip,
Mm-hmm.
and and after my brief stint of studies with her, the next set of lessons happened in North Carolina when I was living there when I was 10.
Mm-hmm.
And I got way more interested in the drums and in studying more seriously. And my parents just opened up the yellow pages and found a local teacher. I have no idea how they went about, if they researched it, looked for reviews, but I think it was just basically opening up the phone book.
Hmm.
And as it happened, he was a phenomenal teacher, a traditional jazz drummer. And my first more serious education with him was all about studying the roots of jazz and jazz drumming. So at age 10, he literally made me buy like a stack of books like this. And they weren't drum books, they were history books
Mm.
about New Orleans, about Louis Armstrong, Baby Dodds, the evolution of jazz, the jazz dictionary, just history, tons and tons of history, and also pictorial history. Um, and that was incredible. It left an incredible impact on me, and kind of set the stage for an interest in the culture behind music, and a study of style. Like to get an idea of how styles are formed, and what impacts them.
And at 10 years old, did you read through every single one of those books?
Say that again.
Did you read through every single one of that stack of books? Were you honest about it? Like when to your teacher, did you go through
Oh,
and read them all?
oh man, I took that so seriously. I
Hmm.
was into it. He was a great teacher because he was so passionate about it, and he cared a lot about me as an individual
Hmm.
and about me as a young drummer and musician. So that was very instrumental in helping me be motivated, aside from my own motivation on just playing drums.
And what about your later education? So you said you've been in the States since age 19, right? Did you go to college here?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. So when I came here at 19, I moved from Israel to the West Coast to LA, and my primary interest at the time was to become a working studio drummer. Studio drumming was a very attractive career at that time. Everybody, there was such a thing as being a studio drummer. And my hero was Jeff Porcaro. Uh,
Absolutely.
many people know him. He was a famous uh, studio drummer, but he was also a celebrity as being the drummer for one of the most popular rock bands, Toto,
Hmm.
pop rock. So my interest was, I knew that he was in LA, and I was actually able to contact him from Israel as a 17-year-old, like 2 years before I came.
Wow.
And I asked him, if he gave lessons, and he said no. But he then said, you should consider studying with my teacher. And I was like, who's that? It's like, well, he's a pretty good drummer. His name's Joe, and he has a school. So he had a school at the time called PIT.
Hmm.
The head of him and another amazing drummer, Ralph Humphrey, where I guess they were co-heads of Percussion Institute of Technology at a school called MI. And so I did the long journey, over the ocean to go study with Jeff's dad, and I did that for a year and a half. I didn't only study with him. Uh, I met another incredible drummer, percussionist, key figure, mentor in my life. His name's Efrain Toro. He's
Hmm.
from Puerto Rican percussionist, and also before I um, I came to the States, I got to meet through my Israeli drum teacher at the time, a guy named Doron Rafaeli, another amazing drummer from the East Coast, Kenwood Denard.
Hmm.
So that that left a huge impression on me. I saw Ken Wood and met him in Israel. I saw him playing with Stanley Jordan and an incredible Israeli bass player, Yossi Fine, who
Mm-hmm.
later on we ended up playing together in my band Droid. But I went to see that Stanley Jordan concert and met him, and that left a huge impression. And then I was on my way to the West Coast, but I was thinking about Kenwood Denard the whole time. So when my year and a half on the West Coast ended,
Mm-hmm.
I went to New York. I flew to New York to meet with Kenwood and to look into the possibility of staying in the U.S. and being in New York and and studying with him, and ended up moving in with him.
Mm-hmm.
He was looking for a roommate, and that was an incredible mind blowing thing on its own. Just the nature of teacher student relationships and the value of being really up close in your mentor's life and studying all aspects of someone that you look up to, not just the art itself, but everything that informs the arts, like their life, their what brought them to be the artists that they are.
Yeah, I've always found that the best artists are the people who the art is just kind of the end of what they do. It's not their whole personality. Because it seems like a lot of people, and I think I said this in my last stream, is that a lot of people, I think, who obsess over the art of making music instead of what feeds the music itself tends to be like an echo chamber of just musical theory instead of real genuine feeling that's going into the music that they're making. And I think the people who really appreciate having non-musical interests and are more about living life and then just expressing that through their music are the ones who make the music that people remember for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting the nail right on the head. I think I truly view the art itself as being kind of the end product.
Mm-hmm.
So, so it's interesting to study the end product. You could be into music and you check out your favorite record and you study. You study the music, you get inspired by the music itself. But when you're pursuing a course of study of trying to get a more in-depth idea of how does one produce something like this? Like, this is incredible. Um, the idea of taking a very close look at everything that informed it, as you very well used that word, is in my opinion that's the way to go. It's a longer study for sure.
Absolutely. But it definitely pays off in the end. So what year is this now that we're at in your life?
I moved. So I was. I moved at 19. That was 90, 91,
Mm-hmm.
91 or 90. It was right after the Gulf War. I was in Israel, and there was this horrible war, and I waited for it to end. And around 91, I ventured out to LA, and a year and a half later, like 93, 92, 93, I was in New York living with Kenwood Denard, and uh, and then shortly after that, I enrolled in the jazz program at the New School, actually, right where you
Oh,
first.
wow. Yeah, I've had a great 3 years here. I've really appreciated my experience at the new school. But I want to, the especially where the school is now, everyone kind of thinks of it as like a cool hip area, in the West Village. What was the city like back in the 90s? Everyone talks about like, oh, you don't want to be in the city back, everyone says it's like Disney World compared to back then. Is that an accurate statement in terms of what the city was really like?
I think that's probably an accurate statement. Like at multiple phases throughout history with New York, like people. I've heard people say that it, in the turn of the century, it was like most dangerous place in the world, and then 20 years later, it they said it again, and when I like that. But when I moved there in 91, it certainly wasn't like what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, yeah, it was a lot more gritty. just as far, I mean, we can talk about, the art and the music. It all affects it, everything really. But after I lived with Kenwood Denard for a year and a half, I went and looked for my own loft. So he had a really cool setup in Chelsea with living on an entire building floor, old
Oh
school
wow.
New York loft, elevator coming into your house, real grungy building. Like, I can tell you stories forever about, the folks that lived there. But I won't right now. But then, around 90 94, I would say,
Hmm.
I started looking for a place of my own with a couple of friends, and ended up in the Lower East Side. Also, we found a very, very cheap 2,000 square foot loft
Hmm.
right in the Lower East Side. And the reason it was cheap was because that area was still dangerous and it was still run down, and you had, lots of lots of muggings and prostitution and drug addicts and drug dealers, and so it still didn't start developing. A few years later, it started developing into this whole other thing that gentrified. But so that was my environment in the Lower East Side, and it enabled me to live in an absolutely incredible situation because the rents were so cheap. It allowed not only for me but for any young artist still in the early 90s an opportunity to move into a place like New York and be able to do that without a lot of money, and be able to
Hmm.
create a situation where I mean, I built 24-hour soundproof studios in my residence. I built two of them, so that one I could use and my roommates could use, and the other I could use as a business. So it was a 24-hour drum rehearsal business.
Wow.
Um, and
What was your rent like back then for a space of that size to be able to do that?
I think the initial rent was $1,600 for 2,000 square feet.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, well, check this out. In 90, 93, 94, I guess that was $1,600. And when I left in 2013, and that was the primary reason why I left, the rents just like my lease turned over, and the rent went up to 25,000 a
Oh
month.
my. Wait, so they kept it at the 1600 and then all of a sudden there was no like it's gradual increase?
No, no, no. It did increase incrementally,
Mm.
um, but somehow it was always under market value because of my long-term, relationship with the landlords. It turned out in the end. Now I understand that also to be true, that it was indeed for many years under market value. And in 2013, I think they were like, that's it. Like we're going to make money now, because there were literally people lined up around the block fighting to get it for 25K a month.
Oh my lord. And you were paying nothing like even close to that.
No, 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 no. I was paying way, way, way. I was paying under 10.
And so with your businesses there, you were able to complete, were you paying your bills totally off with the businesses run out of that apartment?
Yeah, there was an initial investment. Me and my partner, my wife at the time, we co-built it and put in an investment, and the investment in the end paid itself off. And there was at least a stretch of 7 years that it was, you know, completely paying itself off, and making some money.
That's amazing, especially in New York City.
Yeah.
Um, so back then in that part of town, did you ever experience, because you said it was, kind of not the best part of town. Did you ever experience any violence yourself?
Yeah, I got mugged right in front of my building. Me and my roommate, and um, walked, I guess, home from the deli at 3 in the morning, scaffolding across the street on the
Mm.
street over. And two guys just crossed the street in the middle of the night. They caught us in the scaffolding, immediately took out two big 9 millimeter guns, put them
Ooh.
to our heads, and there was, that's an easy mugging, because there's very little chances anything's going to happen to you. They don't really want to get caught. Um, so that's easy. You just give them, you don't say shit, and you fork over the goods. I mean, it was scary because that never happened to me like that. But uh, yeah, that was really that. When I'm thinking like violence in New York City that I've experienced, I think when I came here, right when I came here in the early '90s, it was a lot. The homeless situation was worse, um, and I remember, especially in the winter, in the subways, I saw a whole bunch of violence that was you know just just nasty stuff. That later on you just stopped seeing stuff like that.
I've seen, I mean, I'm fortunate. I haven't experienced a whole lot of really bad violence, but I've seen some stuff like I saw a guy. You ever watch the WWE?
Yeah,
Yeah, so like the giant like body slams that they do.
yeah.
I saw someone right in front of my apartment grab a guy. They were fighting, and one guy says, I think they were just kind of like, just like a little fight, nothing that bad. And then the one guy turns around, and this other guy like slaps the back of his head. And the guy who gets slapped turns around, picks up the guy completely, flips him completely over like this, head over heels, and slams him right down on the concrete. And the guy's out for about 5 minutes. And then that guy stands up, realizes what happened, and then starts going to attack the guy again. And the guy turns around and just pops him, and the guy goes right out, falls right asleep. And his friends were like carrying him. I was watching this going, what the hell am I watching? It was like watching a match at WWE. It was right out my window. And that's that New York vibe. New York is incredible.
Yeah, I'm sorry you had to experience that, Scotty.
Well, no, I think they were both fine. I think they knew each other because I have seen them before, and I think they were. It was just, I don't think it was like they hated each other. It might have just been a friendly a friendly debate that went out of hand. But you got to see some New York stuff eventually. What do you think about, like, when's the last time that you've been to the city post COVID?
I was in the city about 2 weeks ago, and that was the first time I was there since April, I believe. And whew, it was quite a shock. Um,
What do you think about the entertainment business? Because people like Jerry Seinfeld are coming out and they're saying how they're going to try to do basically everything they can to make sure, like, especially, for him, it's the comedy club scene. But are you concerned about the future of New York in a way that you haven't been before?
oh, big time. I mean, it's not absolutely, and not you know it's not isolated to New York. We're in a world event, so we're going to see this happening, in different ways all over the world. But yeah, I can talk about New York because that's where I live, and my city, both upstate and down in the city. Of course, there's what's going on right now will have repercussions, I predict, for years and years and years to come. Um, you know, Most of the industries are in shambles, and the entertainment business is completely shut down. And I'm not expecting it to be one of the first to recover from this. And also, I'm really not seeing anything going back like overnight.
Hmm.
I think everyone's been under the feeling, and rightfully so, like wanting to feel like, at least when this began, like this is a temporary thing, and when can't wait for things to come back to how they were. But I don't think. I don't think we're at that state, at that level anymore. I think things things will evolve into something new that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I'm concerned about. I mean, the one nice thing is there's a possibility that the housing market will get better and get cheaper to rent, which is something that I think New York needs, because I think a lot of times the rent is getting so inflated that it's just pushing people out of apartments that anyone should be able to afford, because some of the apartments here are so small, yet they cost a tremendous amount of money to live in. But I'm I'm concerned about. My biggest concern is that large companies are going completely online now, and I'm worried that basically what's going to happen is that once they go, then Broadway is going to. I mean, Broadway might. I'm worried about places like Broadway. The major theater companies are even hurting really badly right now, and I think once large companies like Google has already left, maybe once the banks leave, if Broadway goes out, I'm concerned that New York is going to lose that kind of New York, vibe that it's famous for, and I'm not sure where it's going to go next, because I can't picture it being in any other city. Maybe I'm just closed minded, but I don't know if it's going to be like New York is going to go out and then we're just going to be lacking that, or if it's going to move and just be a different city, and that's what the next generation is going to kind of know as the entertainment headquarters of the country.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's these are the right questions. We shall see.
I'm waiting it out right now. I'm just basically saying I'm just gonna, I'm living somewhere I can afford right now. Um, they haven't raised my rent yet. I lived here a few years, so I'm hoping that I can stay here for a while and just kind of maybe just wait out the overall. Uh, maybe if I think we're about to have a second wave. The city's going crazy right now because they're about to shut down a bunch of stuff. I don't know if you heard, but like uh, 9 zip codes were going to get shut down, and that went to 12, and then that went to 15 or something like that. And now, if anytime you're over 3% infection rate, you go right back to or what is it called? The businesses. I can't think of the word. I've heard it a million times on the news, but basically you can't have unnecessary businesses. And my zip code is at 2.99%.
Mm.
So I might have to go back to that. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I'm worried that this next few months is going to be bad. And I think people are starting to try to get back to normal. And I think that's a good thing, but I also think that's going to hurt us, because I think that might delay us another, 6 or 7 months. Because I don't see really, now that Broadway is officially off till May, I think, of next year, I don't see major entertainment returning to the city till at least midway through next year. And that's concerning, because even, everyone talks about New York City in the 70s and 80s, being not the greatest place, but that was nothing like it is now. That wasn't. Now it's like everything is closed in the middle of the day, and you can't go see a Broadway show for the first time since Broadway's basically existed.
Well,
And
I wouldn't go as far as saying that New York City in the '70s and '80s wasn't a great place. There's ups, there's pros and cons to every period, um, including, it's my belief, in our period right now, as hard as it may be to imagine, but um, for instance, on an entertainment level, an artistic level, New York City in the '70s and '80s was like unbelievable.
mm-hmm.
And then and when I moved to New York, New York City was still unbelievable on that level. And the stories were that 20 years before that, you should have seen how it was then. But other folks would say 20 years before that, you should have seen how it was then. But then I really saw it in my tenure in the city, like really go from incredible to like shut down, shut down, shut down, shut down before the pandemic, and now we have the pandemic, and that's it.
Yeah, it's a worry now that, like, are we saying, oh, it's just not as it's was so much worse back then? Is that just kind of that generational thing? And is it just like we're repeating that generational thing, like you said,
Well,
or is it really a new problem that is not generational?
depends on what level, depends on what level. On an artistic level, I think there were much more opportunities, in the 90s, early 90s, and before that in the 80s and 70s, for young artists that are not wealthy to come and be in an incredible multicultural hotspot like New York, and have an opportunity to make it work. So that is, a huge plus. That's like, to me, that was always like what, a huge attraction, one of the biggest attractions for me about New York,
Mm-hmm.
to see others that have come here without a lot of resources, and had, the guts to carve the path to their dreams in a place like New York. And I've seen how it gotten, harder and harder and harder, to the point of being like literally like not seeing how that can work for someone today.
Mm-hmm.
Not even today, just before our world pandemic hit. But in other on other levels, I've seen more crime, before, and uh, stuff like that. So it's there's always two sides, multiple sides to the story.
Absolutely. And fortunately, a surprising amount of clubs have been able to stay open. So maybe they can, you know, kind of ride the wave out for the next few months and get their business back. But what was it like living in the city in the 90s? What was that club scene like? What was the 90s the pinnacle of that scene for your life, or were you able to see some good, a decent amount of music in the early 2000s as well?
Are you talking about going out to see music, or being involved in making music in the club scene?
I'm talking just going out and saying like, oh, so and so's coming to whatever club, to the Vanguard or whatever. Was the 90s the pinnacle for you?
Well, places like the Vanguard, the bigger jazz clubs, a lot of them remains, to this day. The Blue Note, and the Vanguard, and whatever else clubs remained. I'm drawing a blank, but there were many clubs, more in the early '90s, that later on closed up during my time. So you know, excuse me. As far as uh, being able to go see major artists that are coming into town, I didn't really feel that decline too much.
Mm-hmm.
When I came to New York, first of all, the first few years, all I did was to go and check out other people's music.
What was a highlight from that era of checking people out? Do you have anything that sticks out in your mind as like something you'll never forget from seeing someone live?
Well, I can tell you, every time Tony Williams came into town for like a week, like at whatever Blue Note, or um, I think in New York he came to Blue Note. uh, it would be like a religious event. From the moment I would hear about it, I would start saving up money so that I could be in every set of every night. So I would be there the entire week, as close up to the drums, try to get to talk to him, try to get to talk to the band members, and really get a larger, the largest possible idea of what's going on over there. Not all, beyond just the music, but how musicians of that caliber are interacting, how they handle themselves, how the music evolves on a nightly basis, when you're playing every night and you're hearing the same compositions.
Mm-hmm.
So, I did that with Tony. I did that with Elvin Jones. When I moved to New York and I lived with Kenwood Denard, he was the drummer for the Gil Evans Orchestra at a club that closed down. It was known as Sweet Basil, and that was uh, that was my first, not my first job, but I guess my my first music related job in New York City was roadieing for Kenwood Denard at Sweet Basil with the Gil Evans Orchestra. And what that offered me was to see that incredible band every week, every Monday night for like 2 years straight,
Mm-hmm.
more, pretty much. So these are some highlights. And then as far as seeing other musicians, other artists, but then the opportunities with the club, the club scene, when I started playing with my own bands, um, there was still enough clubs that you could find a home for yourself. You would, get a band together and, play a bunch of different gigs in different clubs. And this would happen quite often with bands that stayed together in New York. You would end up finding kind of like your spot, like the club, the venue that you formed a great relationship with the owners, and your audience started to kind of know that they can expect to see you over there, and these things often turned into like a regular gig.
Mm-hmm.
And those sort of situations were the most incredible, because you end up feeling like you have a home as an artist, and there's an artist community around you. It's not only you and your band. You're within like a whole cloud of artists and that are kind of trying to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
What are you spending back in the 90s to go see a week at the Blue Note? Because that's like, I mean, nowadays that's like, what is it, 80 plus something $30 minimum for drinks? You must have been spending a fortune.
yeah, I was spending the minimum amount possible. I don't even remember. I remember, for something like that, like to go see, like really like my top uh, musical heroes, and definitely when it comes to drums, to Tony, Elvin. Um, I would do whatever jobs I could get. It would be a mission, like save up money for this. I wasn't really thinking like about anything else except accomplishing that goal so that I can be there for a week and to see that.
Are those guys your biggest influences as drummers, Elvin and Tony?
Um, I mean, they're really up there. I wouldn't. It's hard for me to say what the biggest are. There are many, but definitely those two are high up on my list at this point. As far as jazz drummers and artists in general, and artists in the sense of not only how they play their instrument or the kind of compositions or careers that they've led, but the overall arc of their life and accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, very, very, very dedicated artists. Maybe at the highest level that I've ever experienced.
Outside of jazz, back in that day, what kind of music were you listening to?
Um, during what period, Scotty?
Around that mid 90s to early 2000s.
Mid '90s. Um, Around the mid '90s is when I had a real shift, and I went from intaking as much of other people's music as possible, for since I came to the U.S., which is primarily what I did, was go and listen and listen and see and listen and be close to, and intake. And around the mid '90s, there was a definitive shift. Not, nothing. It wasn't planned at all, but there was like a moment arrived when I was literally oversaturated with sounds and information about everyone else, and I kind of, it startled me, like, my God, like I've been so influenced by all these other artists, and I have no idea, who I am and what my voice is. And in a very natural way, I stopped listening to other people's music.
So it wasn't a conscious thing. It just kind of happened.
It wasn't a conscious thing. It happened. I very quickly, at a certain point, started losing interest in going to see other people play, listen to records. This is like complete oversaturation, or not even oversaturation, but just, filled to the brim.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the balance tipped over to listening to myself exclusively, and to a very limited core of friends, co-collaborators that I made music with, and that became my primary focus, musical focus, um, for a long, long time. I mean, I'm listening and checking out other people's music today, but this went on for years. So my other interests were, if you're asking me, mid '90s, myself, my bands, my friends' bands um, that I collaborated with, and so around then, uh, there was a whole new movement of DJ artists, bringing the technology and their artistry of DJing and remixing to all of a sudden, like there was like this bump in the creativity level, and it became like this unbelievable thing. Like you would go and see like some artist, some DJ in a club, and it wasn't some guy putting the needle on a record or doing some scratches anymore. It was you had a sampler there, and maybe a keyboard even, and a sequencer, and just seeing remix artists and DJs evolve the complexity and creativity of what they could do in such a short period of time, it seemed, and it drew so much interest from live musicians. So live musicians checked this out, and there were like heads were being blown, and it was so interesting on a rhythm, not only on a rhythmic level, but on a technology level, and on a multi, on a global music level, because all of a sudden, all these styles that you have in digital and vinyl um, format from anywhere in the world were being reassembled in front of your eyes in real time. So that has a dramatic effect on style. Okay, it's like styles are born like that, and to me that was the jazz of the day. That was
The groundbreaking genre.
that to me is jazz because it's innovative. It has improvisation in it,
Hmm.
and um, and it speaks to your local Joe on the corner of the street. Like everybody can relate to the sound because it's the sounds of the street. It's
So
not some yeah.
you were never hesitant to it because I know a lot of musicians try to disavow DJs and remix artists as being non-music because they're using someone else's music, but you were always immediately accepting to it.
Well, what I'm referring to, in kind of like the mid '90s, um, with the remix artists and DJs that I saw was a new music, a new form of music making, and a new style being born out of and the styles kind of like emerged every month almost. It's like this to that, and this name and that name. Um, from a dramistic point of view, there was an interest in drum and bass and jungle because of the extreme syncopation and tempos, and, and drummers were listening to stuff that was like, okay, no human plays like that. But wait a second, can we?
I
And
definitely hear that inspiration in your music, especially your more electronic music, because it sounds almost like you produced a drum track and then transcribed it and played it back, which I think is a really interesting sound because it's mixing that world of humans don't play like this, but yes, they can, and I'm about to do that.
yeah, I mean, electronic music was a very big that electronic music of the mid '90s was very influential on my playing for a dense, relatively short period of time. Like maybe like 4 or 5 years that I checked it out very closely, very carefully, like getting inspired from it, and a whole bunch of artists in New York, in New York City and in England and in a couple of spots, but New York and England were kind of, I think, um, the core places where this was evolving. Um, we're reinterpreting that type of electronic music, each in their own way. Some were way more trying to get it to sound like a machine. Some were getting influenced by the how remix DJ artists are composing, like the compositional level, how things are structured within the composition.
Hmm.
Um, and in my band Droid, I think we were more jazz influenced and more free about it. I don't think our approach was to try to get that mechanical about the sound making, but the compositional aspect of it influenced us a lot. At least me, that's what was going on in my head.
How much do you feel that Israeli music has affected your composition style?
Um, it's a very good question, Scotty. Israeli music is a combination of so many musics. Also, Israel is kind of similar to New York because it's a state that's about the size of New Jersey, and you have so many cultures and people from all over the world, and all of them bring their music with them. So it's also a mishmash of cultures. So that kind of world sound has been in you know within me since I was born. Listening to the sounds of my environment in Israel. But there's so many different ways. Directions that you can go when you're talking about music from Israel. There's traditional Arabic music. There's Israeli singer-songwriter music from different periods. There's Moroccan influences. There's Tunisian influences. We have African influences. Egypt is right next to us. Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. It's all intermixed.
Hmm.
So like if you're talking like Mediterranean, Middle Eastern rhythms, that's in my blood because I come from that, and I've heard that from the day that I was born, and um, that's a part of my ethnicity. I guess you could say. It's just something that I don't need to study that in order to be able to hear it exactly for what it is. I can move to it. I can sing it, and I don't know how to play, those instruments necessarily.
Hmm.
I mean, I can mess around on a doumbek darbuka, and as a matter of fact, that was one of my first gigs was playing darbuka in Israel, accompanying Egyptian dancers, Israeli and Egyptian dancers.
Mm.
So it's definitely an influence, big influence, but I haven't really dissected it more than that. Um,
Do you play music a lot when you go back to visit Israel?
Um, Not really. I have a core group of musician friends in Israel, and we try to get together and play a little bit. Sometimes we'll do a show or two. Haven't done that in a while. No, my musical working ground has primarily been here, and when I go over there, I like to spend time with my family and friends, and take a break really from music making.
If you didn't want to take a break, how would the gigging scene be? We actually just got a question from Carl Taylor. He said, "What's the gigging scene like in Israel?" So if you didn't want to take a break, do you think you could fill your schedule with gigs there?
In Israel,
Yes.
um, no,
Mm.
I no, I think I would not be able to fill my schedule with gigs. Um, I haven't worked in Israel in that capacity for years. Those who I know in Israel that are full-time musicians have a very hard time doing that themselves.
Mm.
Israel has incredible musicians, um, and the scene is pretty small. The state is small. Most not I don't know about most, but many musicians that in Israel at a certain point feel that frustration, and that is many times is what draws Israeli musicians to step out of Israel, at least for a moment, to experience and feel, what are the possibilities of growing your sphere of where you can perform, and who you can interact with. Um, so. look, if you're talking about right now, during our times right now, there's no place that you can do that. But before the pandemic, no, I wouldn't be able to go and fill my schedule.
Mm.
Not that that's what I'm doing right now here. My involvements, my musical artistic involvement, has many facets to it. It's not one thing that, oh, I'm doing this one thing and it's taking up all my time. I'm doing many things and they're all taking up the majority of the time.
How has your business model changed for for music now that the pandemic has hit? How has that affected the way you are planning your future in terms of just, getting, making income?
uh, it's a big question, Scotty. It's like I don't really have an answer. I mean, off, uh, the first thing is that everything has shrunk down. Anything that I was involved with on a musical artistic level that has been bringing in income has either stopped completely or dramatically shrunk
Mm-hmm.
on every level. So that's a very big deal, and that's it's, if you're asking what's my personal take on it, I don't know. I mean, I'm in the process of finding a solution. Finding multiple solutions. Um, Certainly, I'm not looking for like what has happened that has brought income up until now, because that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Those avenues are closed down. So I'm looking into like anything new that can surface, but it's a big one.
Do you see anything outside of music directly that interests you as something that you could be involved with in a business sense? Like any other passions that you could turn into a job that you would really be passionate about doing?
I mean, I have many passions. I don't know if I would devote the time to start a business with that. One of my passions is cooking. I spend awful lot of
I
time
love cooking.
in the kitchen, and that comes very natural to me. But that's one thing. But am I going to open up a restaurant right now? I don't think so. But you never know. So I don't want to close off any avenue. You
Yeah, I
know.
mean, my whole thing was one of the reasons I started doing this live stream podcast was that I love music, but I like it. I really love entertainment as a whole, and so I wanted to try something that was had the potential of being something that I could pay my bills with, but something that was tied to what the entertainment industry as a whole, but was something I could do, especially now from my house and I don't have to go anywhere. And so I've been going through just like trying to figure out, my game plan seems nowadays is just changing constantly. Because it's like
Yeah.
one day you go, oh, it's all gonna be back, and then my plans are on, and then the next day it's like, oh shit, no, it's not.
Yeah, I'm involved in recordings, so some of that is bringing in income. I'm involved in
With your label, correct? System dialing.
yes, and sometimes for other people's labels as well. I'm involved in obviously online teaching at this point, so that's a whole new way for me to rethink on the approach on teaching and making it valuable for the students primarily. Um, and who knows? I'm trying to think. I recently built a dry laid stone wall, and
Ooh.
like working in nature, spending time with natural things. This is a good time. We're kind of forced to stay away from society and most humans. So there's a plus side to that as well, to reconnect with nature and reconnect with, re-experience what these things mean to us. And that left me with a really good feeling, building that stone wall, or I could see myself splitting wood to make a buck, or
Someone
any.
actually just commented. They said it was Carl Taylor again. Says he feels like woodworking would be a relaxing hobby / job. Absolutely, woodworking is absolutely incredible. I'm terrible at it because I can't, I don't have much of an option. But I love woodworking. is really nice.
Yeah, who knows? We were just talking about, I'm not about to open a restaurant, but now that we're talking about it, like, I may find myself buying a food truck and get on the road because people need to eat, and including myself. And I love to.
Yeah.
That's something that's just natural. I don't need to think about it. I don't need to go to school. I don't need to look at a recipe. That's something intuitive. Music has been different for me. Sometimes I see real gifted when I real gifted musicians to me are ones that it just comes so natural to them. They just don't have to work hard at it.
Hmm.
That's a gift. I feel I have that with cooking. Music for me has been real hard. I've had to like bust my ass to learn a lot, and and I'll probably keep doing that. Keep needing to do that because it's more of a passion than something that has come naturally easy for me. But the
Mm.
passion is so great that there's an inspiration to work really hard at it.
Mm. Here we have another question, Amir, from Analog Ofer. Did you try out that Blender Cafe Shakarado we talked about today? I don't know how to interpret that.
Shakerato. It's the latest.
Shakarato.
Shakerato. It's the latest Italian rage on ice coffee. Because you
Uh,
shake it like in a drink shaker with the ice. You put the espresso in ice, and I like to put cream in there. And then what happens? It froths up like an incredible ice cappuccino. Um, but that's my brother. He's wondering if I put it in the blender, and the answer is analog offer. No, I was actually contemplating it, but no, I did
I
not.
drink drip coffee. I'm boring. I have a 17.50 Mr. Coffee, and I drink drip. I haven't gotten into the whole, fancy coffee drinks, which is I should, because my whole side of my family, my dad's side of the family is Italian. So
Mm,
I feel like I should know more about that, but I just drink cream and sugar.
right on. Have you visited Italy?
I have not, but I'm currently learning how to speak Italian.
Great.
Something that I would say is one. It comes to me as easy as difficultly as anything ever has. Language is not my strong suit. I mean, English is. I've always been. That was the one good thing in high school that I was really good at is English, of course, because I was born with that language. But learning new ones is absolutely mind-boggling to me. So I'm very slowly learning how to do it. But I've always wanted to visit Italy, but I think I want to wait till I can hold a conversation in Italian so I don't have to keep saying,
Right on.
ask
Yeah.
people what they're saying. Have you ever been?
I've been all around that region, and I've not been in Italy, and it's one of it's probably like the top next visit spots for me personally.
Absolutely. Some of the best food in the world. You said you like cooking. Italian food is incredible.
Yeah. Woo.
Here, Mira, I want to take it back real quick before I get off track. I want to ask, so we talked about you living in New York. At what point and how did you get connected with Ornette Coleman?
Or with Ornette, a longtime collaborator of mine, Jordan McLean. He's a trumpet player, composer, arranger. He was associate musical director on Broadway in a Broadway show called Fella on Broadway. And Ornette came to check out the show, and him and Ornette struck up a friendship. And I guess around 2008, I think Jordan probably had a conversation with Ornette about me, and Ornette wanted to meet me. So I was invited through my friend Jordan to meet him, and that's how I met him initially. Yeah.
And what was your working experience with him like? Would you say it's overall very positive?
Oh my God, life changing, all positive. One of the most incredible experiences of my life.
Mhm. He was,
Yeah.
I mean, he was an absolutely incredible musician. And like, I've didn't get into him until when you first started talking about him, during one of our classes. It was probably drum lab, my first semester. I didn't know much about Ornette. And I started listening and I was like, it's incredible. And even the more out stuff, which is not usually my cup of tea, I always liked when Ornette did it.
What do you mean even more the of the out stuff? Isn't it all pretty much out there?
Yes, but I'd say there's some arguably some of his music is a little more out than others.
It's true. It's true. I'll tell you. The funny thing, Scotty, is when I met him, um, I didn't, and I've been involved in jazz for so long and all my studies and this and that. And for whatever reason, of course, I knew of Ornette, but I did not know his music at all. I mean, at all. I couldn't tell you one Ornette tune. Um, I couldn't tell you that I knew one Ornette tune when I met him. So
Hmm.
one of the most incredible things for me that set the stage for my relationship with Ornette was early on in his home. He had his studio, and at the very beginning, my visits to his place, there would be a lot of musicians, that are in town, younger, older, that would kind of flock to his place, and he would have people over to play and jam, and I was invited to one of these, and and I wasn't even thinking about playing. I was just there.
Hmm.
I was hanging out in the living room and seeing all these amazing jazz musicians, young to old, go in and out of the studio, and he's in there playing, and sweating balls, like outside of the studio. Just I'm sitting there and I'm seeing all these musicians practicing and asking each other, "Hey, do you remember that tune? And do you remember that tune? And how does it go?" Thinking that that's what he, God forbid, he might call a tune and they don't know, right?
Yeah.
Which is along the lines of what I was thinking too. And I wasn't considering even to go in there and play, but at a certain point, Ornette stuck his head out and called me in because Jordan told me, "Hey, Amir plays drums. You should let's have him in." And Ornette called me in, and I was scared shitless. I was, oh my god, I don't even know a single Ornette tune.
Were you playing out music at the time in general?
Sorry.
Were you playing more out music in general at that time?
No, I was playing a lot of electronica. I was playing jazz, but no, I would not say that. But what happened was I went in there and I just I made a switch, and I was like, I'm just not going to sweat it. I'm just going to play and forget about what I know and what I don't know. And we played like that for about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and then we came out, and I walked after Arnett, and um, I told him, I apologized. I told him, like, Ornette, I'm so sorry. I have to tell you that I don't really know your music at all, and I feel so bad about it. And he took my hand. He took me by my hand, and he told me, "Well, this puts us on equal ground because I don't know any of your music as well." And what that means to me is that we can now make real jazz together. And that was it. That was like a life changing moment, mind blowing moment for me. I was just jaw drop, speechless, and that was Ornette, my experience of Ornette, and that's what led to our collaboration and our work together.
And how long did you work with him?
It was probably, maybe a year and a half, 2 years.
Wow. So he just sounds like an incredibly just genuine guy who just really wanted to make good music. It seems like there was no ego there.
I haven't seen a shred of ego on Ornette in my life. The best individual. Oh my God. Yeah.
That's always great to hear. I love hearing musicians that have that selflessness and care more about the music than they do about themselves, because it seems like musicians a lot, you tend to hear horror stories about them being, overly arrogant. And I like to hear people who are just they really care about what they're doing, and they're not just, trying to, you know, they have their thumb up their own ass about what they do.
That's not Ornette, man. Ornette deeply cared about the music, about about humanity, about individuals in the room, about all of humanity. Constantly spoke about it in the most genuine ways, and that was, one of the biggest gifts I got from him.
Wow, that's an incredible experience to have with somebody, because especially with someone of that caliber, could totally be an asshole. And I think a lot of people would just say, oh, it's Ornette Coleman. But it's I really enjoy hearing that someone like him is just, trying to do his best and isn't letting his arrogance get in the way of that.
Yeah.
Have you met a lot of people in general that are like that? Has your experience with musicians of that higher echelon caliber, is that usually that experience, that they're more humble than you'd expect, or have you found that a lot of people have that kind of arrogance?
I mean, you're talking just about my personal experiences. People are people. Humanity is humanity. There's always some ego involved,
Mm-hmm.
and you're gonna find, the full spectrum is out there. I've been pretty fortunate, I would say, that the majority of folks that I've worked with, even those with higher levels of ego, the commitment to the art and to the collaboration was always so high. And in general, I gravitate towards surrounding myself with good people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very hard for me to make, like, if I know someone, is I don't get the best feeling about them as a human being, it's going to be very hard for me to make, to co-create, something beautiful. It's not impossible, but that's, I gravitate towards, having a good feeling, and between me and people around me, and that varies for person to person. What's going to create a good feeling for you? For one person, it might be like, they need some aggressiveness in their relationships to feel good. And for another person, it could mean the opposite. So,
I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about making good music.
is that what it is for you?
I mean, like, it's all about, having a good time making good music. Is that, do you object to that statement?
At the end of the day, it's about making good music, bettering ourselves as human beings, looking more and more, polishing ourselves, finding out about our not so pretty areas, and polishing them, and getting to recognize, the things that we do well, and using that to our advantage as well, to spread joy, to spread love, to be happy. Our personal happiness, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone, is so important, because then it vibrates around us, and people can feel comfortable being happy around that as well. It attracts that as well.
Well, Amir, that is an incredible sentiment. I think that's a great place to leave us off. So I'd like to say thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for coming on.
Scotty, you're the man. Thanks so much for having me.
You're the man, Amir. And I also like to say thank you to everybody that watched. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can check it out on YouTube. There'll be a full replay. I'm going to have clips from it. And then if you'd like to listen to the audio version, you can check that out on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Amir, thank you very much, and have a good day.
Wow.